Welcome to the New Warehouse Podcast, the podcast for those that are curious about what's possible inside their four walls. Before we get into this episode, let's hear a word from our sponsors that make this all possible. In my operations years, it seemed like we were always trying to find more space or we needed a quick storage solution for a special project. That's why when I discovered Palite and their Palite Picks solution, I was excited. Made from ultra-strong engineered honeycomb structured board, these corrugated shelving units can support up to 1,100 pounds. They're definitely stronger than they look, and they come to you flat packed for easy installation in minutes. I've built them and utilized them myself. They provide customizable configurations with up to 400 pick faces. If you need storage quick or you need to maximize space utilization, you need Palite. Check them out at palitegroup.com. That's PALLITE group.com. If you're listening to this podcast, then you're most likely looking to discover the latest innovations in warehousing, logistics, automation, and supply chain. Why not do some of that discovery in person when the Intralogistics Conference and Trade Show hits Dallas on September 16th and 17th. This free show will be at the K. Bailey Hutchison Convention Center, and I'm excited to be on the floor to explore cutting-edge technologies, see live product demonstrations, and hear from industry experts. Register for free today at intralogisticsusa.com and join me in Dallas on September 16th and 17th. I'll see you there. Thank you to our sponsors, and now let's get to the podcast.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And today we are going to dive into some robotics, and we're going to talk a little bit about physical AI as well. And we're going to learn a little bit about what's going on, what's the latest with Berkshire Grey, as we'll be joined by the CEO of Berkshire Grey, Dave Paratore. So, Dave, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks very much. I'm doing well. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yes, happy to get you on. Definitely, we haven't had Berkshire Grey on the podcast in quite some time, so excited to get the latest and dive into some topics with you here today. So why don't we kick it off here? Tell us a little bit about Berkshire Grey for people that aren't familiar with you all and kind of what you bring to the market.
So we've been around for a little over 10 years, actually. We're pretty quiet about it, though. We don't spend a lot of time kind of advertising and talking too much about it. Pretty decent sized organization, about 400 people. Really, the heart of this company is around robotics. And I would say more recently, robotics and AI. We've always been AI driven, but it's been in the background. Hasn't had quite the cachet that it's had in the last 5 years as an industry.
Sure.
But from a macro perspective, we are pretty much focused on warehouse automation. So we do a couple of different things in warehouse automation, whether it be robotic pick cells or trailer unload or shuttle sortation, all of which come from the same kind of core set of technologies.
Yes, absolutely. And, really great to get you on here and talk about this and interested in kind of diving into that, especially, Berkshire Grey being around for a decade, but you're fairly new to Berkshire Grey, right? You've been with Berkshire Grey for about a year and a half now, I think I saw. So tell us a little bit about kind of your background, and you mentioned in there too, kind of, how AI has become much more to the forefront in recent years, right, than in the last 10 years, right? But tell us a little bit too about, what kind of brought you to the company, what attracted you to Berkshire Grey overall.
Sure. So I categorize myself basically as a pretty simple operator. I love to make things. So I'm not a robot guy. I'm not an AI guy, but I am an industrial products guy. And there's kind of a common thread across all the products that I've been fortunate enough to be involved with in the last 20 or 30 years. And it's that they're all typically a new technology trying to be deployed into mature spaces. And so with that in mind, I've done everything from jet engines to fusion devices to home insulation, motors, generators, gray water, carbon capture, but all of them, again, have that same theme, kind of industrial products that at their core are new technologies trying to be deployed in spaces that are somewhat mature. And so your customer base is typically pretty mature. What kind of drove me to Berkshire Grey, it is an incredibly attractive space. When you think about the opportunities in warehouse automation and robotics, or that intersection of robotics and AI in the warehouse, there are very few industries that can do things that I like to do, which is physical products using technology and being deployed massively. And so that's one of the things that attracted me to Berkshire Grey. The other thing is the experience this place has. It is not a startup per se, but it still runs kind of like a startup. It has that energy of a startup, yet it is mature, and it's been kind of battle tested and gone through quite a few scars to learn what's really important to customers. So when you combine all that and you look at the stage that it's at today, it's at a stage where deployment is really where we are. It's not just about developing technology. A lot of people are out there trying to develop technology, and hey, we are too. We do it at the same time. But deployment is really the phase that this company is in now. And I think that's the skill set that I pretty much bring to bear.
Gotcha. Very, very interesting. And certainly, super exciting time to be in the warehouse space in general, because the technology that's just happening and the things that are becoming possible are just kind of amazing, honestly, as someone that's been in the warehousing industry for like 15 years. To see what's happening now is just kind of like, whoa, this is a little wild in some cases, right? So definitely exciting to do that. And I'm curious there, from a CEO perspective, you said something interesting there. Even though Berkshire Grey is about 10 years old, as we said earlier, it still has kind of a startup culture, startup ethos or mindset in a sense. And I'm curious, as like the leader of an organization like that, how do you balance keeping that type of kind of startup mindset, curiosity, kind of culture in a sense, experimentation, but then also like still, make sure the company is moving forward in the right way and maturing at the right level? How do you navigate that from a leadership perspective?
There's a couple of ways to look at this, but you're more than familiar, I'm sure, with the basic philosophy of, are you a market pull or are you a technology push kind of business? And a lot of the startups are technology push, that they have a great idea, they think someone's going to want it, but they're more focused on their technology than they are the customer. That works to some extent. There are some very good case studies of where technology pushes work, but for the most part, what we are right now is market pull. And so we may have started as a technology push, but we've gone through that kind of transition and said, technology for the sake of technology doesn't really buy anyone anything. But technology, as it supports a customer problem, is really where the opportunity lies. So when you think about how you transition a company like ours through that, the key focus on a customer is really where everyone starts to kind of solidify around. And you can start building the ideas of, we love developing technology, but not just on a tangent that's not going to lead to a customer solution. And so that's how we drive most of our conversations is, what is the customer looking for? How do we satisfy those needs? And it goes well beyond just delivering a product. And I think that kind of transitions into what the experience of a 10-year company can offer, is that we've been through that process of deployment. We know what it takes to be there after a technology product or technology-based product has been delivered and you go home. It is the support day after day after that, year after year, that provides us somewhat of a competitive advantage because we've been through that process a number of times. And so I think that's kind of a combination of what we're really good at. We're really good at focusing on what the customer's asking for and making sure that we really kind of drive the how do you de-risk for that customer. As you know, most of the customers in the space, they're big customers. They don't like risk.
Yeah.
If you think about it at a macro level, it's execution and risk is all that matters. And so for us, focusing on how we minimize risk for customers makes it a lot easier for customers to consider deploying our products.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love the way you put that because, I often talk to startups in the space and I find that as a challenge where they have this technology idea, but they're kind of lacking a little bit of the operational experience, in the actual market or the customers you mentioned, they're like experienced, and then it doesn't quite land as they think it's going to land, right? So I love how you kind of put that as like, the market push, like what, or the market pull, like what is the market asking for, right? Like how do we, actually talk to these customers, which you're 100% right, that, in the warehouse environment, warehouse distribution, fulfillment, right, is kind of risk averse in a sense, right? Because they're like, I can't stop shipping, right? So I don't want to disrupt, like I don't want disruption, right? Like I'm not here to experiment or play in the sandbox with you a little bit. I mean, some are, right? But the vast majority are kind of like, hey, like we need something to go in and it needs to work and it needs to be an improvement, right? It's not like we can't just be status quo or decline in any sense too as well. So I love to hear kind of that mindset. Very interesting there. So now tell us a little bit about, because I see Berkshire Grey, right, is positioning itself as a physical AI company, right? I see a Google Berkshire Grey right in the kind of meta description there. It says physical AI. So tell us a little bit, because you mentioned there, you all have been, doing stuff with AI for quite some time. And obviously, as we touched on that, in the last few years, AI has become absolutely everywhere, right? I mean, whether it's personal life, work life, no matter what, like it's there somewhere, right? So tell us, like from your perspective, from the Berkshire Grey perspective, like how do you actually define physical AI and why are you putting so much attention on it as a company?
I would take a step back and say that
Sure.
physical AI is the latest name for things that we do. And 2 years from now, there'll be a new name.
Sure.
But ultimately, I think it's a good name because it's really combining two things. It's combining the AI that people are all getting used to in some way, basically the ability for software to work in flexible or highly variable areas and make decisions that before you had to discretely program. So, that's kind of the AI in our world, is that transition from discretely programming things to a system that can interpret and make decisions in a highly variable space. And then you combine that with the physical execution of that. So it's not just a large language model. It is something that can make a decision based on its vision, based on its understanding of the machine's capabilities, and based on the environment it's living in, and say, how do I take all those things in a space that maybe I didn't see before? Maybe it's one of those variables is new for me, and how do I actually translate that into an executable task? So that's kind of the way we define it. But in that regard, when we talk about physical AI as a company, we recognize that that's kind of a natural progression of what we started 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Because even then, you could use, what I would call more junior levels of AI and build from there. So what's happened, in my opinion, and the rate of change, as you know, the rate of change has accelerated so much in the last 3 to 4 years. But it's really about increasing the ability for that machine to work in a variable environment and make those decisions. So even though we could do that 10 years ago, we can do it a lot better now. Like everybody, a lot better now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious there, like, obviously things have gotten faster, right? And like you said, like the rate of change has just increased dramatically. But I mean, tell us, as someone too, like with your background in industrial products, I mean, how much quicker are things moving now than, a decade ago, where you mentioned you're using kind of this junior levels of AI in a sense, right? I mean, how much faster can you go now from like, idea concept to actually like testing something, having something physical to try out?
That's a great point. So you could always do that. I mean, even back 20 years ago, it depends on how fast and how much effort you're willing to put into something and translating it from a concept into a physical presence that you could do something about. And if you really think about it, one of the most important changes to that was the ability for additive manufacturing to come in. And so now, even today, we use additive manufacturing in our development lab to quickly develop new grippers, so that we can go from a concept to a new gripper in a matter of 3 to 4 days and figure out, does that gripper open up more SKU capability, SKU eligibility in the space? So there's a convergence, in our opinion, of multiple technologies, not just the software, but the ability to produce stuff much more quickly, get systems integrated more. We don't see ourselves as purely an AI company. I think personally, that is just one aspect of what we deliver. And you know this better than probably many. The customer really doesn't care what's inside. The customer just wants a problem solved. And so you can talk about AI, and they only are interested in that after you solve their problem. Then they'll talk about, okay, what's in there? But for the most part, what they care about is, do you provide a solution that's easy for me to use? And is it cost effective? And so from our perspective, when we look at the ability to respond more quickly or accelerate, what the first place of that begins, or the place that begins, is what's the customer feedback? So we went through a really detailed analysis with customer feedback about 4 or 5 months ago on the pick cells. And what we were looking at is, what is the customer value? What does our technology already have? And where are the gaps? And then from there, how fast can we identify those gaps, identify solutions to them, and get them installed in a solution the customer can use? I think that's gone much quicker than it was 3 or 4 years ago. And now you get into that layer of, where do you use AI? Yes, we absolutely use AI in our products, but we also now use it in our processes. So we make that distinction in our software development, using the AI tools, like a Codex, for instance, being able to use that and rapidly develop software, even having people where software wasn't their kind of natural space, developing software more rapidly so that we can integrate it faster. That convergence, again, has really accelerated things. And so from an overall speed perspective, I think it's hard to say how much faster, because it's impacting so many parts of the business.
Yeah. And it's interesting to see, like you said, kind of the influence, or just the impact overall on these different parts of the business. Because even, on the user side, right, like inside the 4 walls, the warehouse operations, I mean, even themselves, as I'm talking to operators, they're building their own things, right? They're utilizing AI. They have their on the floor people using AI to do SOP and process development and think about all these different things in different ways. And it's pretty incredible to see how it's opening up like the minds of people, and how, whereas I have an idea, but I'm, not an engineer by trade, or I can't code or anything like that. So I got to wait for somebody else on the team to have some bandwidth to be able to help me with this idea. Whereas now, I can go in and just start fleshing out this idea myself and get it further down the road than I would have been able to, a few years ago. So it's really interesting there. And I'm curious, as you talk about kind of the market pull, and then also kind of this customer feedback that you're going through. I mean, what are you hearing from the market now? Like, what are some of those top challenges that you're hearing that they're looking towards automation, they're looking towards AI to be able to solve some of these problems? Like you said, I just want this problem solved. Like, what are some of those kind of top problems that you're hearing out there in the market right now?
Yeah, I would say that the two that come to mind immediately are unloading of trucks, which we'll talk about in a second, and then the robotic picking. We have a third product, which is, as you know, it's shuttle sortation. And that is really what that's addressing, is the brownfield installations where you can make things much more efficient use of space for how you sort and order fulfillment. But the other two, unloaders, that is a clear opportunity. And I've listened to some of your podcasts, and I heard you guys talking about it at one of those. Yeah. That problem is a problem that's just not going away. And it's not necessarily that it's any harder than it was 10 years ago. It's two challenges. One is the volume just keeps growing. And that is coupled with the labor shortages keep also growing.
Yeah.
It's a very hard job. Generally speaking, what we try to do is automate the tasks in a warehouse that they simply can't either find people to do or people don't want to do it any longer. And so unloading is one of those places where the problem is a really clearly defined problem. How fast can you get trucks unloaded regardless of the environment? It can be 110 degrees in that trailer. It can be minus 10 degrees in that trailer. I had heard one point that the average tenure of a trailer unload individual was 5 months in the parcel industry.
Yeah.
It's so challenging. And so that's a problem that we clearly see a lot of interest in. That's a market pull example. The other market pull example that we see is in the picking. And I think it's a combination of two things. It's one, e-commerce has really, obviously, accelerated or exploded. And so there's a lot more orders that need to be filled. But I think secondly, the customers have gotten more comfortable with the state of the solutions that are available today in picking. So if you rewind 3 or 4 years ago, there were early adopters, people trying it. And today we still have early adopters. But in addition to early adopters, we have people that are saying, look, as you said earlier, I don't want it unless I know it works. So demonstrate to me that it's going to work with my SKUs in my facility, and then I'm thinking about buying it. So that is a problem that definitely needs to be solved because the volume has gone up to a point where it's hard for labor to keep up. And labor costs, as you know, at least in, call it North America and Europe, the labor costs are so high, it's hard to cost justify more and more people at a highly variable problem like picking. So I think those two are the two areas that we see the most kind of growth from a customer interest perspective.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think, you said you've listened to the episode, so you already know that I'm passionate about the unloading aspect. I think, that's one of the toughest in my experience, if not the toughest overall, role there. And like you said, it's high turnover because it is just very physical, repetitive work. And then, temperatures combined in the trailers, as you mentioned too, as well, it just becomes very, very difficult for anybody to fall in love with that role for sure. So longevity there is short. Yeah, definitely. So I'm curious, when we look at some of these solutions, obviously there's still a huge percentage of warehouses that are not automated. They're not looking at robotics, right? But we're seeing more and more solutions come out there. Definitely lots of different offerings on the loading side of trailers, and lots of different form factors too, which I think makes it really, really interesting space right now to see there's different approaches to this. So when we look at kind of Berkshire Grey and the market, how do you position yourself or how do you define yourself as a differentiator to some of the other solutions out there?
Yeah, I think there's multiple facets of that. One of the most important ones is our experience base. So before we even get into the product, we've been working with some of these customers for a decade. FedEx is one of them. Obviously, we're public about that. We've had a long-standing positive relation with FedEx. They are one of those companies that understands technology needs to be somewhat of a journey, and they have been a great partner to go on that journey with us. That being said, if I look at that challenge of how do you get it from where it is today and the diversity of the solutions, you're absolutely right. In the warehouse, let's start with unloading. The unloading solutions are very varied. Boston Dynamics, Pickle, ourselves, we tend to go one level down in that question and say, it's not just about unloading, it's about what you're unloading. Okay. And so you have a spectrum of challenges on unloading. You can go from a very well-structured, all carton kind of trailer that needs to be unloaded to what we call is a mixed trailer, floor loaded. It could have everything from boxes to poly bags to forever bags to non-conforming like a canoe or a kayak. That's when we sat down with FedEx and said, okay, what's your biggest problem? They looked at that spectrum and said, if you can solve this one, the really hard one, that's the one that gives us the most value. Because unloading a trailer that is just all uniform boxes is a relatively easy, albeit, can be physically challenging, relatively easy problem to solve. So that's when you start to see the diversity of the solutions. We don't see a lot of people playing in the space of unload that we play in, which is let's go for the hardest one first. If you think about it from a macro perspective, the well-structured loads, all boxes, is basically a giant pick cell. And so we've been doing pick cells for 10 years, 12 years. If that was our task, we would just make a giant pick cell. And you see that kind of in some of the other solutions. They're basically big pick cells. We don't do that. We do bulk unloading, high volume, complex loads. And that's where the combination of our software experience, call it AI, and our hardware experience really is the best place or comes to bear the best.
Yeah, very interesting. And you said unloading kayaks and canoes. You automated?
Yeah,
that's impressive.
Non-conveyables is what they're called.
Yeah.
So, when we start looking at the solutions we have to provide, this is where AI becomes actually an enabler. Is that we have to identify those things before they get on the conveyor. So our system isn't just looking at boxes and saying, I can segment all the boxes and see every individual one, and I know how to grab that by the centroid. Ours looks at it and say, is it a box? Is it a forever bag? Is it a poly bag? Is it a kayak? Is it a tire? Did someone put a pallet in the middle of this trailer that didn't belong there? We have to identify those, make sure we indicate that to an operator who isn't necessarily standing next to it, and understand what to do with it. So we, as a system, we look, and maybe you saw our system at Modex, it's a little different than most other systems because of that requirement.
Very interesting. Yeah. And it's interesting to hear, going for, like you said, the most difficult side of the spectrum, right? Because I think oftentimes it's like, all right, let's do the low hanging fruit, right? Because then we can kind of prove it out a little bit, and then we can expand from there potentially, right? But I mean, I think it's a great approach, strategy, because if you can solve for the hardest, right, the easiest becomes even easier, right? in theory, right?
Well, it does. One more thing that I would add to that: what's really important is not just can you make the product work. It's I always look at the Venn diagram. There's a market desirability piece, there's a technical feasibility piece, and a commercial viability piece. And the market desirability is clear. People want unloaders. The technically feasible is pretty clear. There's a bunch of different solutions. The commercial viability is the one that people are still struggling with. And so that gets back to, does it work 24 hours a day? Are you there when I need you? Can I have one operator managing multiple units? And so one of the things that you don't really think about when you think about deploying this product, unless you're living with it, is can you set up a system where, let's say you have 5 of these at a station or at a facility. Can I operate all 5 from being at one of them? Or can I operate all 5 from being remote to all of them? That's just as important as how well the machine works. So when we look at a solution, we look at it as how does the customer want to be able to use this? How does it actually really reduce the cost associated with labor or the cycle time with throughput? And how do you make it easy for that customer to integrate into their warehouse? Yeah,
that's a great point there. I think that, and kind of along those lines too, I think here we had a question from the audience on LinkedIn, as I posted about that I'm going to be interviewing some people, and they're curious about, you talked about the commercialization there and kind of the utilization and how do you kind of allocate the resources around that. So when we look at that, I mean, oftentimes, the conversation goes to kind of ROI, right? Like, when am I going to make my money back? Am I going to make my money back? It's in some cases, right? So when we think about that, I mean, how do you look at that? Like, how do you work towards the ROI kind of modeling of it all? And I think another question in there too, because I've been hearing this over maybe the first half of this year, last half of last year, is like, some people aren't quite necessarily concerned about ROI yet. Like, they're just like, if I can break even, I'm good, because I know that I'm going to get there, or the technology is going to get me to a place where I'm making money off of this at some point. So how are you all approaching that and that conversation?
Yeah, that's a really good point because I think that there is that bifurcation of customers.
Mm,
You have some customers that are just what you said, like we know at some point this is going to be worth it, so we're not worried about the ROI model right now. But those are becoming few and far between.
mm,
And I think that's a great sign of their expectations of the products and the maturity of the industry as it's starting to mature. So the expectations are growing from customers because they're like, we've already been down that journey. We've
mm,
seen that enough times. Show me one that actually makes the math work. And so for us, ROI is something that we look at in every product installation. We have a model pretty much across the board. So whether it be pixels or sortation or our unloader, the customers we're talking to all care about that. Now, maybe we got unlucky. Maybe we didn't find the customers that don't care about ROI, but at the end of the day, I think all of them at some point are going to be measured that way. So us being focused on that right from the start, I think there's a Stephen Covey expression that says, begin with the end in mind. The end in mind here is it's got to work financially for everybody. So it's not just about, can you technically make it work? It's commercially, is it something that they can rely on? Is it something that actually is worth the money?
mm. Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a great point too, right? Because it is kind of like, all right, well, if you all right try to make it work for them on their side, and then you're like, well, we're not making money here. How are we going to afford to support this thing, right? For the years to come, right? It needs to balance out on both ends, and I think I think it's really interesting to see some of that because I do think, and I'm curious your thoughts on this too. Like, I do think we're at a point where people are like, all right, well, I need to start getting into some of this technology because I know like my competition is, and if I don't get in now, even though maybe it's not quite math in the way I want it to math, right? Like I'm going to be way behind if I don't get started. Are you seeing some of that too as well?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
There's no question that in the spectrum of adoption, you have people that have been doing it for a couple more years, so they have a little bit of a head start. And then you have you can break business down into fear and greed, right? And so the people that are starting to be fearful when they go to the trade shows and they see a plethora of solutions and they realize that one more press release about someone starting here or trying this, they're getting nervous about not doing it.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you do have a fair amount of customers that are interested in making sure that they stay current. And where we see that is more on the picking side than we do on the unload side. I think the unload side is a little behind it from a product maturity as an industry than picking. I think you would probably agree with that.
Yeah.
And because of that, on the picking side, we have had way more inquiries in the last 15 to 18 months than we probably ever had because the market and the solutions appear to customers more mature. And so you've got those people going up, someone else is using it and everyone keeps talking about using it. I can't be left behind. So it's interesting because at the same time, those customers very quickly don't want to be an experiment. They want you to demonstrate. And one of the things that we did at Modex and we do here every day is we encourage customers, bring your own SKUs. And so at our Pixel at Modex, unscripted, people brought their own SKUs. We picked on site without no programming, no training, nothing. And we do that literally daily here in our center here. We have 2 centers of excellence here, but one of them is simply to do that. Bring your SKUs, send us 500 of your SKUs. We'll put them in one of our auto stores. We'll pick them with a commercial auto store, with a commercial Pixel. You can see how well it works. You can time it with your own stopwatch.
Yeah. And I think that's great to kind of prove it out, right? Because it is, there is a balance there, right? Where somebody's like, well, we don't want to be late, right? But we don't want to be the first, right? Yeah. Like, we want to be maybe like 4th or something, right? Like we want to prove it out a little bit with somebody else. Yeah. Let somebody else be the guinea pig, but I don't want to be like the last one in the race, right? So it's an interesting balance there. But I love that you're like, okay, just bring your products to us and we'll show you like how it works. And I think that's a great way to approach it and get hands on with that. So now if we look kind of towards the future of everything, I mean, where Where do you see kind of the warehouse automation market heading? What do you think is going to be the direction that people are moving in?
I think it comes down to the capability of the solutions and how they are almost monthly able to do more and more things in a highly complex environment. And so when someone asks, what's the future of it? I'd say it's penetration associated with the ability to do more. And if you go back 5 or 7 years ago, a pick cell functioned, but maybe the SKU eligibility of someone's SKU set was 60%, 65%. And now you're closer to 80 to 85%. We just had one of our first customers where we're very proud to say we had 100% SKU eligibility. So it's a relatively large customer where we can pick 100% of the things in their ASRS. That wasn't a possibility 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And so for me, the expansion in the warehouse gets back to how many more types of customers can we do that for on the picking side. On the robotic side of a trailer and load, it gets back to the same thing. How many more complex loads can you handle? And then it becomes, like I'm sure you know, how fast can you handle them? Yeah. That's the unit of measure, right? They want accuracy. They want throughput. They don't want damage. All the things that we take for granted that humans do really well, those are all the things that we have to learn as a robotics-based company. And I think the industry in general is maturing through those phases.
Yeah. No, that's incredible to hear. 100% able to pick all of the SKUs for a customer. Because I remember, even when I started this podcast in 2019 and started like getting more into the world of robotics and automation in the warehouse space, and I think even then, like, I think some of the highest numbers were around 70% or something like that. So I mean, that's a huge evolution and super impactful for the customer side too, to be able to have that high percentage of SKUs being able to be picked robotically through a gripper or something like that. So I think that's very interesting to see, and I think very interesting to see kind of the progression there as well. We'll definitely be looking forward to seeing kind of the continued evolution on that side too. So now, if people want to kind of see some of these things in person, you have some locations to do that, right? You just mentioned centers of excellence, but you also just opened a new innovation center in the Netherlands too as well. So tell us a little bit about that. What's the goal of the innovation center, and what can people expect to see there?
Yeah, it gets back to my three kind of mantras here around make it easy for people, execute, and reduce the risk. And so if you think about the facility in EMEA, what it comes down to really is how do you actually make it easy for customers to get comfortable with this technology? So make it as close to the customer as you can make it. Make sure we can service the customer from the same time zone. Things that we kind of take for granted in today's world for many industries, they're still being born for this industry. And so while we have that in the North American market, and we've had a presence in Europe for a while, this is really an increase in presence more than it's a creation of a new presence. It's about making it easy for these customers to experience the technology and the products that evolved from that technology, get comfortable with their own requirements being satisfied by that, and then being able to support them real time in their time zone.
Yeah. And I love that, you're starting this innovation center and opening this innovation center. I think like it's such a great point. Right? It's like, how do we get people to see these types of things, right? Because I think as we've talked about, right, the penetration, there's still a ton of space to go, right? So oftentimes I imagine you come across customers or talking to customers that, are not as deep into automation or robotics in their operations yet, right? So they need to see like some kind of exposure, like, and wrap their head around like, okay, how does this actually work? Like, what does this actually look like? And what does it kind of physically going to be in my operations. I think that's a
In your
great opportunity
operation.
to do that. Yeah. So really cool, definitely. And if I'm in the Netherlands, I'll be sure to stop by for sure. But
You're more than welcome. You can come up here too. You're only in New Jersey, so come on up.
all right, I'll be up there.
You know,
Then,
the other
definitely.
thing, Kevin, about
Yeah.
that, if I may,
Sure.
let's say that's phase one. You get a customer who says, "Hey, I'm interested. Let me come see it." Phase two, we still see a lot of people saying, "Can you show me in my facility?
Mm.
Can you install one here?" With a little bit of risk.
Yeah.
And that's the key. Like, so, because I'm going to use a production cell. So yes, I want it demonstrated in my facility, but I don't want to take 100% risk. So we've been doing a lot more of that as well. Even though, you don't want to be doing demonstrations, we don't see them as demonstrations. We see them as customers that are truly trying to gain confidence. And the easiest, best way is to show them in their facility. And so we've been doing quite a bit of that in Europe lately.
That's interesting. Yeah. And I think it's great that you figured out a way to do that too, because I can see how it's like, all right, we see it, we kind of understand it, but yeah, like I need to visualize this in my own operation on my daily cadence and things like that. So that's very interesting to hear as well. So really appreciate you coming on the show here, Dave, and sharing with us a little bit about Berkshire Grey and kind of the overall market and how you see it as well. If people are interested in learning more about Berkshire Grey, maybe they're interested in visiting some of the innovation centers, what's the best way to get in touch or find out more information?
Obviously, we have our contact section of our website. That's probably the best way. In fact, that's the easiest way to do it. It's consistent. It's always available. I would say that's the best way.
All right, fantastic. And we'll definitely put that website and all the information about Berkshire Grey at thenewwarehouse.com, as well as in the show notes here. So, Dave, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.